Good afternoon, and welcome to today's caregiver workshop, Crafts for the Family, Engaging Loved Ones with Memory Loss. My name is Allegra Jaffe. I am a social service specialist with the Fairfax Area Agency on Aging with the Caregiver and Supportive Service Unit. Before I introduce today's instructor, I will go over a few housekeeping items. Today's presentation is being recorded, and a link for the recording will be sent to all registrants a week from today. We have enabled closed captioning in case you need it. Also, there is a Q&A button where you can submit your questions. Lastly, there will be a brief survey as you sign out, so please take a moment to fill out that survey because it helps us create programs that are relevant and important to our caregiving community. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Cate McCarty. Dr. Cate is a gerontologist and dementia care coach whose personal and clinical experience includes over 40 years of creating quality of life for individuals with dementia. She has a master's degree in thanatology from Hood College and holds a doctorate in aging studies from the University of South Florida with a focus on dementia. Having returned to her native state of Maryland during COVID, Dr. Cate is loving virtual work and coaching individuals and families, offering support groups, memory cafes, and webinars. Dr. Cate, welcome and thank you so much for being here today. Please take it away.
As a as a nurse's aide before there was certification. Then I evolved into an activities person, which then became a certified activities director. And then over time, I got my master's degree. Then I went with the PhD. But what I am always doing is translating research. And the most fun part is when it's about play and recreation. So, and notice I did on purpose leave out for memory loss, because I think one of the important take homes today is that we are a family and we all have something we can share. Now, I know that stage wise that can, and which disease, which dementia a person has factors into that, but I'd like to find things that can level the playing field. And this is an opportunity because we want things to we're within the home and things that you could do together. So we're going to jump right in. First, I wanted to go over, I've introduced myself, and we're going to have 3 projects we do together. We're going to talk a little bit about how to prep for those. I am very aware, and I have a little bit of caregiving in my own home and have had with family members in the past, that sometimes the idea of prep and doing something extra is mind-blowing and very difficult. So I want you to know that I hear you, and I think that these are great ideas, and sometimes they can't happen. And sometimes a word like prep will set my head on fire. So please know that we're not going to do heavy duty prep, but we're going to talk about ways to try for success, how we level the playing field, and that's more about how we're going to cast it as family. And then we'll do our 3 projects, and then we're going to talk a little bit more just to kind of just send home what's essential. So first, let's go, and you go ahead and flip the slide there for me. There we go. Yes. So all of my ideas, and there's way too many ideas, by the way, are on the Pinterest page. And this is a link, and it's under Cate McCarty. I tried to set up a business page, and I couldn't quite get all the time together to make that happen. But you'll see 2 links. One says Memory Cafe, and one says Manatee Memory Cafe. The Memory Cafe link on the Cate McCarty Pinterest page is the one where it was tried and true. All those have been tried and done with couples or families that came to a memory cafe. We're not talking about memory cafes today, but they are opportunities to get together with others and do things together. And since I'm a recreation person, we tend to do crafty things or cooking things or cognitive things. in a variety of locations. And if you want to know more about that, there is an international memory cafe directory, and that's literally what you search for. So if that's of interest to you, it's an excellent way to get a little socialization. I do memory cafes twice a week myself, and they're virtual, so they're not always live. You don't always have to suit everybody up and take them somewhere. But I do have a live one here in Maryland now as well. So go ahead, Allegra, can you put us to the next one? So I think, and we're going to talk more about how we level the playing field. Whether you are an older provider, say it's your spouse that has a dementia diagnosis, or you are a daughter or a neighbor, and you want to include a family approach, we look for things that are more childlike. Now, we never want to take the dignity of an adult with a dementia diagnosis away, but we do want to give them success. And when you look at, say, the Pinterest page, you'll see that the only place I search for ideas is in the children's section. And Allegra, if you don't mind, could you put up the FAST scale? And that will explain a little more about what time travel is. Because as your grandchild or your child is developing and getting better acuity at hand-eye coordination and better moral development, the person with dementia is going in the opposite direction. And it's called retrogenesis or time travel. And this is the scale that's been out forever and is used a lot in academia, as well as in hospice, for example, often uses the functional assessment staging tool. It's the FAST scale. And if you look here, and Allegra has the first page of it, it's a 7-stage scale. Look at the characteristic column. That's where, and I'll be honest, this is the quick and dirty one. There's a more developed one called the global deterioration scale. These are available on the website that we'll provide at the end, but they're also available online. But the characteristic is where, it's kind of let me look at this and try to identify where we are. So usually we don't know anyone. They don't come to a memory cafe or probably even to the neurologist until they're to 3 or 4. Now, God willing, and I'm going to knock on some wood, Allegra and I are at the normal aging. And so, and I'm pretty confident in Allegra. Sometimes I'm not so sure about myself. But we have a subjective, we think, as we've developed this, and we continue to develop perhaps in our wisdom. But then stage 2, you see this is mild cognitive impairment. This is often when the person's no longer quite processing the same way, but it's vague and it's hard to capture. And you may have that at your house. And you see sometimes if it's vascular dementia, you might see a lack of interest. There's starting to be, but there can be many reasons why a person backs away from something they used to do. And then 4, because I've traditionally worked in memory care, assisted living, this is when people, like, they're not paying the bills the same way, or they're not cleaning the same way, or they can't remember where to put things, or they go traveling and they're completely like standing in the middle of the museum, not knowing where to go next. Like there's an overwhelmedness that happens. So 4 is often where people really start to notice and maybe get some help. But that last column, that is the one where we're talking about the undeveloping. So you see at 1, Allegra and I both identify as an adult. Now, as a person develops or undevelops, they're always identifying as an adult, but nobody sees the difference. But as time goes on and they start undeveloping, you see at stage 3, this is the mild cognitive impairment. The mental and emotional processing of that person is more like that of a adolescent. You might see increased flirtation as an example. You might see even like a little gossipy or like a little threat. Well, I don't know why she's doing that. almost like a teenager in junior high, right? And then as the scale, and Allegra, you can go ahead and move on to the next one, and you can see how that declines. So we started as an adult at stage 5, moderate dementia. You may not be putting your clothes together well, or you may not be changing them because you really are overwhelmed by how many choices there are. That would be more like a 5 to 7-year-old. Why this is important? It's never important to tell people what they can't do. Absolutely never important to do that. But as care partners, it helps with our expectation. This applies to crafts and play. There's a whole body of research, well, not as big as it needs to be, and I hope to help make that change, but looking at the undevelopment and how it applies to childhood development. Like, as we learn to do things as a child, we are unlearning, right? There's an undevelopment happening. And this is why sometimes you'll take your loved one to the local supermarket at like 5:30 and they haven't had dinner yet. And they may be not have gone to the restroom lately, or they may not have had a good intake of liquids lately, and they have a complete breakdown, much like a 4-year-old. This is the person that at home needs help bathing and maybe needs some redirection or shown to the restroom. But the tolerance is gone. That complete breakdown. And if you're blessed to have grandchildren and people with dementia in your life, you can see that there's some similarities. In my house, sometimes my granddaughter's over, and sometimes she's got more empathy and more social skill than Gramps does. So that's that. They're like ships passing in the night. That's an example of undevelopment. And if you look, this may or may not be important for you, but over time, people end up in the 7C or 7C to F is hospice. And a lot of the hospices use this scale to determine that. And now this does not mean, because there are so many, over 100 forms of dementia, that everyone's going to lose speech, or that everyone's going to no longer smile or no longer walk. But if you look at the trajectory of how a child develops and how dementia is undeveloping, you will often see, and we'll look at our projects today with an eye to, is this a person that's going to eat the beads? Honey beads look a lot like blueberries. If I can't see color, that makes a difference, right? So that could probably, I guess, well, you can always access this on my site, and we'll go back to the slides now, if you don't mind, Allegra. So we're attuning, level the playing field is a way to look at, okay, so we all have to do something that everyone succeeds at, right? So we try Monopoly, it's probably too complex, or there'll be such severe competition. This happens at my house, where Gramps wants to win and so does my granddaughter. And so you have to go for different kinds of programming, different kinds of crafts, for example. Okay, you can go forward if you don't mind. As we deal with the changes that come from memory loss, we see changes in eyesight. Teepa Snow does an amazing, she talks about how we have scuba mask and it goes down to monocular vision. And you may notice, like, if you drop behind your loved one, they are startled from the peripheral vision. Problematic with driving. Peripheral vision is important, but it's slowly shrinking. So we do things like have a dark surface. If you have ever noticed your care partner trying to pick up a pattern off of a tablecloth, for example, that's some of the vision changes, right? So we want a common dark surface. We talk about this with eating. People do better if there's high contrast between their plate and their table or their placemat. And one of the things that I do when I do one-on-one memory engagement is we put out, got them from Target, I'm sure everybody has them. They are colored, dark colored mats that are really like inexpensive chopping boards, but it's a way for a person to see where their skill set is, where their project is. The number one thing is on this slide. It is about the process. If you are a high perfectionist, black and white thinker, this going to be hard for you, because we're not going to be doing Martha Stewart's. We're not going to, I mean, Rice Krispie bars could be a challenge. They can be wonderful, creative, and someone else has to operate the microwave. But at the same time, it's difficult. So you have to know that it's not about what comes out. It's about that we have engagement together. So the grandchild or the teenager, yeah, that's a hard one. We want results. When we look at like a teenager involving them, and this even applies to my 8-year-old granddaughter, sometimes I have to separately appeal to her with saying things like, Gramps needs to feel like he's part of the family. Can we do this together? I know it's not something you love to do, but he'll feel like he's part of the family. And being part of the family can be as simple as being at the same table. We always talk about family time and family meals. That is part of it. But together, the engagement part. So sometimes we have to go high end to engage the older child or adults and say, look, we need a sense of purpose. He doesn't feel like he fits in. He's not sure he's offering anything to the family, but we can do this. And sometimes that involves therapeutic fibbing. And we say, you know, the daycare needs these bookmarks because the kids are all learning to read. And we're going to make these bookmarks. That's a random example. We aren't making bookmarks today. But sometimes we have to mold the story so that there's an engagement. Our results, we're looking for not the perfect project. When you look at Pinterest, don't expect yours to look like that. And you'll see mine don't look like that, because I did these projects ahead, so I'd have them. We're looking for smiles, we're looking for giggles, and we're looking for a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. And we can proceed now for the slides, Allegra. Oh, good. And here are our 3 projects, and you can look at them. We're going to do a water bottle whirly. That was my name. The butterflies, I guarantee you ours won't be quite this pretty, but we can talk about how to make them this pretty. And 2-ingredient cloud dough. One caveat I want to say here, in case I forget, is that when we look at matching skills, there are people that will not understand that this cloud dough is not edible. And so there are a million cloud dough recipes or Play-Doh recipes that are edible. I used hair conditioner because I knew everybody probably had it at home. But we also can make Play-Doh out of flour. It just becomes more than 2 ingredients, right? So we always want to look at acuity, and that includes this, that includes the scissors. Safety scissors or child scissors, the longer the blade, the more dangerous. And then also the neuropathies of the hand. We often have the change in eye-hand coordination is because we don't always feel all the fingertips. So the shorter safety scissors will work. And one of the beauties of that is that our water bottles are much thinner plastic than they used to be. But again, back to matching the skill set. So it may not be that your 14-year-old son or daughter or grandson wants to make cloud dough, but we can make an excuse for why we're doing it. But if the person is not, depending on where they are in the scales, you could be making real dough. You can make pizza dough. You could make an easy bread recipe. Bisquick is a magical thing. Many biscuits were made on my memory unit because it's easy. It's milk and it's Bisquick, and like you put it in the oven. And then if you want to really jazz it up, you like strawberries. So when we talk about matching skills, and I know I'm stuck here on the slide before we get into our projects, we talk about matching skills. Montessori method. Now I've talked about, now the FAST is actually, when you look at it, it's Freud, the moving back in time. I've talked about Piaget. I could talk about Kohlberg. These are all psychologists. But when we talk about matching skills, we talk about Montessori. So we see in the research much evidence on how important Montessori is, and that is sorting, sifting, pouring, scooping, kneading. Those are, they're very sensory, right? So you could literally put a table sandbox together and do a treasure hunt with your grandkids, and you change up the treasure, right? But and with your loved one with dementia, because it's the sorting. Well, see, think about how cooking fits into that. I mean, I had a woman that was very advanced in dementia. I was working very heavily with the family, and every day at 4 o'clock, she'd pull everything out of the cabinets and get into a tizzy, because traditionally, 75, 80 years, she makes dinner, but she didn't know how to make dinner anymore. So what we were able to do is A, put some latches on the cabinets, but B, at 3:30, put the bagged salad out with having already clipped the top off, and ask her to put the salad into the bowls or sort out the good potatoes. You see, we can take a project, including if they're not putting stuff in their mouth, including sorting pony beads by color. One of my favorites is sorting coins. That goes way back. Your grandchild probably won't know how to roll coins, but way back, yeah, we rolled coins. So those are some ideas. So why don't we go ahead, and Allegra, I'm going to switch my my video to my so you can see my hands and such. Go, there we go. And what I will start with, because and I'll be honest, it smells the most. And let me get my camera to not cut off my head. Well, maybe we do need to cut off my head. Okay. I'm going to start out with the cloud dough. Notice the dark surface. This works for all of us. I have progressive lenses, and I can lose things in a heartbeat. Like when my I got a purple cover for my phone because I could lose it, right? The earbud is black, and I'm like, could they make one that's not black? Because we can see better, right? And as our eyes and our brain don't necessarily work anymore, we want a dark surface. So very important, and also a lot to ask, because I know you're very busy, is to gather the supplies ahead. Now, I'm going to reach here. I've got all of my 3 projects in this old box, right? But they're within reach. And so I would suggest that if you have a desire to do things together, after everybody's in bed at night, maybe a month ahead, you put it together so that you can just grab a bag and say, okay. And another important thing that I didn't is timing. Don't do this when everybody's tired, right? It doesn't work. So what we have here, and this was the easy one. I thought I had lots of those little travel bottles of conditioner, and apparently I've used them as shower gel in my travels. Because you can, right? Adaptability, and flexibility are very key. I've got cornstarch that, believe it or not, I've had since I lived on a boat. That's how often I use cornstarch. And I lived on a boat about 7 years ago, then moved to Florida, then moved to Maryland. So this is a very, tried and true cornstarch. I'm going to show you the finished project here. This is cloud dough. And today it's a little slimy, so it needs actually some more cornstarch today. This was stored in the fridge. So I wanted to try that. It smells amazing because it's Pantene. One of the things we want to do as those stages, as we go in undevelopment, we want to become more sensory. So smells are important, even though about 50% of the people who have Alzheimer's they don't know they can smell. We know that their brain is responding to the relaxation of, say, the scent of lavender. We've seen that in the research. So smell is still important. Color is as well, but nobody else had color gel color at home, because that's what it would be to do the color. But you see, I have a different color base. This wouldn't be as fascinating or as useful if I had used a bowl that was white or or clear or something. The other thing is, if you have someone that is likely to eat it, you don't want it to look like a cereal bowl or look like something that is edible. The Pinterest page tells you to use like a tongue depressor. I've got the ubiquitous plastic spoon. I used a measurer, and then I have cloth. I suggest wipes because they're more efficient, but somebody in the household needs to keep her hands busy during TV time. So we have a lot of those, right? So what you do here, you've got your cornstarch, and it ends up being like a 2-to-1, but you can do, you start 1-to-1. So I've got a quarter of a cup here. You don't have to do this. Maybe you only have a small amount of cornstarch at your house. I'm going to put a quarter of a cup in there. And again, perfectionists beware. This is not a perfectionistic world anymore. Once dementia has entered your world, you've got to be a lot more flexible, because, it's not going to matter. What matters is engagement, feeling a sense of purpose, happiness. So imagine you have a 2-year-old granddaughter and you're making cloud dough. Well, you don't want the granddaughter to be using the measuring cup with the hair conditioner, because she's gonna want to eat it, right? But you could let her stir it when it comes to that. You could let her do the cornstarch. Now, you may want to lay out a big mat, right? And this is a pump bottle, and you see pump alone is a it's a process. It's not everybody's going to be able to do this. It just depends on the stages, and it smells really good, and you can talk about it. You can always reminisce. Do you remember? Did you ever make anything with glue? This is a little bit like the glue, but it's not going to stick, and it's going to smell a lot better. You see, I'm just scraping it out. One of the things that's helpful too is if you have a discard pile, so that nobody when you're not looking because you're so engaged, are licking or doing something. Yeah, so you can put it away, put it out of sight. This is where you can really, in a way, use what is the acuity that's lost. Like out of sight, out of mind is a real thing. So move it away. And then this is where we just stir, and we stir. And my bowl could be deeper, right? Definitely could be deeper. And when it gets to a critical mass, and I'm going to be the Martha Stewart if you ever watch her on Today, when it gets to a critical mass where it looks like it's all sticking together, then we add more, because ultimately it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio. And then I'm going to switch, because this is what Martha does. Notice it's off screen, so you can't be terribly worried about it. It's out of sight, out of mind. Done with the hair conditioner, and going to add some more because this is still a little sticky, right? And those are discussion points. Sticky, cold. Don't eat it. Just again, back to depending on. And if you look online and in Pinterest, they'll show you all kinds of things you can do with your cloud dough. One of the things with it that's very Montessori-like is that just manipulating it, just feeling it, sculpting it. We did this in the winter. We did it with, we made snowmen. But here, we could We could make a sandscape, and we could put a little coins in it, or again, just ways to manipulate. How about we make a snake? We can make a snake. We can make a pretzel. You see, these are all things you can do with your cloud dough. Just a little, and it'll never dry. I didn't leave it out. I did put it in the fridge, because if it's a success, excellent. If it's not, later on we'll look at a slide. Know when to fold up. This is where Kenny Rogers, the gambler, comes in. If it's going terribly bad, they're not going to remember it necessarily and hold it against you. So let it go. Just say, okay, let's have a snack instead, and put it aside, right? So let me put up my different projects aside here with this. Got it going on now. I don't have a very big discard pile. Okay, so that is an example, and now let me clean up. You might want aprons. One of the things I always did in my memory unit is, if it was a cooking, if I want to cue the person to what we are doing. Let's face it, we didn't do cloud dough in 1940, 1950, probably 1960. Play-Doh came along later on, right? But you want to cue people, if it's cooking, by using an apron. If it's art, maybe it's a smock, or maybe it's just let it go. We probably don't want to wear the button-down shirt that we wear to the doctors, right? Now we're going to move along to our whirligig. And see, I've put it all in a bag. And there's a lot here because I am who I am, so I have a lot of product. I tried to pick a list that most people would have in their house. And this is the whirligig of which we speak, you see, and it's out of a water bottle. What's boring about mine is I only had black and blue. But, that might be something I'll add to my list the next time I put a Walmart list together, is to get Sharpies with color, right? Because this is something you can do. Now, this couple strategies for how to use this. You leave the neck, so you can slip it onto a branch, and then it'll flop in the wind. And over time, it'll relax. I'm guessing it may be a good squirrel deterrent, which would be really helpful for my window boxes, because I have squirrels that love to dig in the supple soil, right? I feel like I need to give the people in the neighborhood that feed squirrels nice boxes of soil, so that the squirrels will dig in theirs instead of mine. But this is our end result, but we're going to start with this. I know everybody has these. I mean, we try to, because we're big recyclers. I think these actually sadly came from the boat as well. No, maybe they came from the RV, but they're probably 7 years old, and yes, I still drink them, which I know you probably shouldn't. But you've got this. You've got scissors. Now I've got big ones, but notice they're the kitchen type. So they're a little more safe, but you would maybe want to switch to safety scissors, right? Most important part about it is you're leaving the neck on. You're cutting off the bottom. But before you do that, you get your markers. So you put these in front of you, and imagine, depending on who's in the family, who's going to be able to do this. Now, if you had Parkinson's, this would be a tough task. But the drawing on here might be easier than, for example, the cutting. And so you're just going to do exactly what I'm doing. And you are going to decorate with your marker. And you might get a little marker on your hand. If you're good, you won't, but you can always get it off with the antibacterial. There you go. And if you ever have any trouble with, you misjudged. I misjudged. I remember once doing bingo and deciding I was going to substitute candy corn for the markers, which was delightful for Halloween. But then the next week when I did bingo, people were eating their bingo chips, because you see, I put muscle memory together with a format, and it stuck. And it is amazing what will stick and what won't stick in Dementia World. Allegra, do we have any questions? I want to make sure I'm checking in on you.
No, not so far. You're doing great. Thanks, Kate.
All right, and so I'm gonna do some stripes, and again, I'm a little boring. I should have gone and gotten some other colors, but I thought about it and I'm like, well, wait a minute. I told people they would be at home, and this is what I had at home. So, you could be, I'm a stripey girl, but a person doing this will do it any way they want. Do the colors, right? And so again, this is probably the skill set that you give to a person who is further along in dementia. You probably don't want to put your best tablecloth underneath it. Something wipeable, right? Because it is permanent marker. And you, again, it could end up on clothing. So think that through. Some old garden shirt or something. Notice this is a cue for me to do this. So you want to probably, and I actually, as a memory engagement specialist, I always have a beverage nearby. The trick is though, which do you drink from? So if this was sitting beside a similar looking hair conditioner, you see how I could get confused. So simplifying, and that's part of that Montessori method, is putting out only what you need. And I'm gonna just go ahead and move on without decorating more, because I don't know how we are doing on time. Well, let me get one more stripe in here. This is not labor intensive. You could do this in parts, like you could do the decorating one time and the cutting another time. There's often a real possibility that you're going to be the one doing the final stage or the first stage. I did many a time I've done soft pretzels with people with memory loss, and I do the kneading. They do the mixing, the stirring. Stirring is amazing. I had a woman in very late stage in a nursing home way back in the day. And it was, I'm a very thematic thinker. So it was Washington's birthday. This was the time when we didn't combine the presidents. And so I brought in a pie shell and a can of cherry pie filling. And here's the woman that contractures in a jerry chair, very little response. But when I put the pie shell beside her and the container of cherry pie filling, it started. And see, that's Montessori. That's back in her memory. That made sense. So we're often on a big old scavenger hunt trying to find out what makes sense. We try to tailor it to what people used to do. And of course, most of us didn't recycle, and these are foreign objects to us. So, and this is where the tricky part comes in. This is where I think you need to take over. We're a teenager. And I noticed my cat ran for the hills when I did this last night, which is a good point to make. You want to, here we go. I put a little hole in there, and then I'm just going to cut off the bottom. Whenever you do a craft with a family, you want to make the environment as calm as possible, because the project alone is enough stimulation. So, the video game in the background or the music's lovely. And we know Montessori uses music to increase people's eating. So you want to play music while you eat, not rap music, by the way, something gentle and calm. So that's often misinterpreted in memory care communities, but you want it to be a calm setting. You want the unmet need. So like if I have to go to the bathroom, I am not going to be sitting here having this part. I'm going to be like anxious and agitated. Unmet need is bathroom. Sometimes it's pain, thirst, hunger. If it's like 5:30, that is not the time for a craft. In general, all of us are better in the morning. Some of us better after coffee, right? So you pick your time. So you see, I've cut off the bottom. And then again, this probably goes back to the teenager. You could let the person with dementia figure out maybe what could we do with this, Dad? Like to me, put a little circle here, and this could almost be a flower, or it could be underneath a potted plant. So talking about things while you do it. So even though the person's no longer going to be able to probably pick up the spiral that I am now cutting, depending on their stage, we're cutting spiral here. Spiral's a little tricky because you got to go up a little bit each time, because you can end up with just circles cut. Trust me, I almost did myself, not being a very spatial person. So you're cutting the spiral here and it's noisy. That could be annoying. If a person starts getting, I mean, you're watching for the feedback, whether it's the baby or the person with dementia, you're watching to see how they're doing. And if they're not doing well, project done, right? Here we go. I'm hoping you had something similar. I did a little bit more, need a little more here. And you can talk about what you could do with it. What does this look like to you, Dad? What do you think? A piece of trash. That's a very real possibility. And it's nothing wrong with them saying it looks like a piece of trash, right? But you could say, hey, the neighbor is having trouble keeping the birds out of our raspberries. So this is what we're using it for. That's our therapeutic fibbing. We are entering their reality to support them. It's not necessarily true that the neighbor, and look at that, how cool is that? We can have several of these and make a whole wind thingy. So I expect Allegra, who has a dad at home, as well as her little, what is Frank, about 10 months old?
Yep, 10 months.
Yeah, they could be. I think Frank would enjoy playing with these. He can't necessarily do them, but your dad maybe could.
Absolutely. And you're doing good on time. We have 20 minutes still, Kate.
Okay, good. And of course, again, you can make this as entertaining as you want. I have glitter glue out, and sure enough, didn't I get glitter glue on my tablecloth last night? So see, I'm putting that all away. So that was project number 2. And project number 3 is very creative. You'll see a million ways to make butterflies. I'm very fond of Mariposa butterflies. They're just magical to me. But I've made them for in memory care. I've made them with grapes in a little Ziploc baggie where you take your you've decorated your clothespin and you clip up the middle of the sealed Ziploc baggie. It can have candy, it can have grapes. You put little eyes with your marker. So, but hang on, I'm gonna get there. Here's my butterfly. Now it's a kind of big one. I think this one came from the Amazon, and I'm not very good at decorating, but that was one example. And here's another example of what I've done, but we'll show you how to do these. And they're really simple. And one of the most annoying things when you get pressed for time and you get takeout, it doesn't matter if you say no utensils, you get them. So we're going to use this as our starting thing. And again, process, not product. These don't look like something you're going to sell at the craft store, right? But they are something that we can use our hands with. So you might give somebody the task of opening it. I would say always discard the plastic because of the other problems. You see how it opens up very nicely. And you can then start decorating. Oops, I've got them. So this is, again, for any age stage, is the markers. And this doesn't have to be permanent markers. This can be any markers you have. So I have my little Paw Patrol markers that came from Easter. Well, I've got the crazy art markers, and I'm just going to really saturate it. So you will find, if given the task, I really need you to do this as heavy as you can, Dad, or really cover it. Do as much as you can. Oh, you like purple? Purple's the raven's color. We could talk about grapes. We could talk about ravens. We could talk about royalty, kings. But purple's a king's color, right? Those are things that you can do as you share the load. Everybody could be making this. How many of these do you have? How many takeout utensil sets are at your house? I found 5 at my house, and I do try to work at not getting them, but it happens. And you'll see I did this one. I thought, well, this is just the red one. But if you were really good and really wanted to look up butterflies, you could do the colors of, every evening when I water my garden, I have a little bluet. And I guess he's thirsty and that's why he's hanging around. But like we could do all blue, or we could do, and here I am using orange. I could add a little black and I could make it a monarch or a viceroy butterfly. So you see, you can take what's simple, like a little craft, and you can make it bigger with watching a butterfly hunt on the YouTube channel.
I just wanted to remind the audience that if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A box. We can't unmute, but we can use the Q&A. Thank you.
Yes, good. And so this is a rather large butterfly. You can see, and I used the fork as his wings. And you see, I put little dots here, and ideally you could use your, hang on, I didn't think of this, but I can think of it now. You could use your twisty tie to make his antenna. This was the real rudimentary butterfly, right? And ideally you want his antenna to be matching in size, right? And see, I'm going to put that up against the green. Now you could decorate with these. I'm not sure what you could come up with as the purpose. Notice I did do the clip the wings, and what I was just doing, I'm going to cut this one in half to make a smaller butterfly, because this guy's pretty dang big, right? And if you go to Pinterest, you'll see a million coffee filters. Not everybody has coffee filters. I have them for crafts, of course, but not everybody has coffee filters. That's why we went with the napkins. But you see, you can create the wing shape by cutting it on the sides and then using your little twist tie. I think I just flipped one out on the floor by accident. One of the things that's very interesting, we couldn't do today because of the time for drying, is if you do any kind of tissue paper, napkin, the thicker the better, or even the coffee filters. Once you have used the markers, you can spray water on them. And I forgot my spray bottle, but I have one that I use on the plants. And when you spray water, it becomes much more tie-dye-like. Look at this one. This one I just did a quick last night, and I sprayed water on it. It just looks a little more impressionistic. I'm not going to say Monet-like, because that would be a really bold statement on my little tissue paper. But you could put these in the window. You could put them on the mirror in the bathroom. Just stick them up. This is, of course, just looks like a bow, doesn't it? And you see how this one. So I think that does our butterfly. The important is context. So a person like my husband, who is probably usually at a stage 3 or 4, depending on the day, he's not going to want to sit down and do this. I'm going to have to put it into context, as in we're doing this for Quinn's school. We're doing this for the neighbor next door, or we're going to get together with the neighbor next door. I have like a 20-month-old next door. And so we could do some of these things with him. Or we're doing this. Yeah, you have to come up with a storyline, often with a sense of purpose. Okay, Allegra, you've got a couple questions there. I'm going to.
Yes. What activities do you recommend for someone who has dementia, is no longer verbal, or has had a hard time sitting still?
Yes. So no longer verbal, that's fine. I think we could do these, I'm guessing, with someone no longer verbal. Hard time sitting still, that is much more physical. And so, and I'm right now, hang on, I'm trying to switch my camera so I can look at you better. There we go. Physically, this is a person that I would be using the beach ball back and forth. throwing beach ball. Now there's two things. You can do a beach ball, which comes slower than a real ball. A beach ball is a little more manageable. And depending on where they are in the undeveloping, then a balloon is very manageable because a balloon sort of floats towards you. So that is something I would do. If they were high on leg like activity, I would use a big ball, a beach ball or a yoga ball, and I would do some kicking or some goal kind of things like, let's see if we can get it, past the sheet. Those are some very physical things. One of the people that I remember well that was very physical in their changes, I think it was Lewy body dementia, was every day he spent 4 hours a day chopping things up for the recycling for the garden. And it boiled down to a butter knife that was plastic because it was the safe, but you can get Amazon safety knives for kids, etc. But he would just chop that. That was in Florida. There was a lot of produce to chop up, and that was, it was movement, right? So you want high movement of some way. This could be a sorting situation, like I had a fella, and it doesn't always work. We're often shotgunning it. I had a fella who had been heavy in his shop and creating things, and we put together nuts and bolts for him to sort. And, please, my father-in-law came from a time where you polish silver, toothpaste, flannel cloth, and some dirty silver. It didn't even have to be dirty. We just bought some from the, I've done this for my clients, bought some from the thrift store, and they would polish. It depends. So much of this depends on what they remember. And this is why tailoring it is so important. If you didn't ever like butterflies and you never folded a paper airplane, some of these ideas might not work, right? But if you were, and I've had pilots, I tell you what, making paper airplanes is a real success story every time. So I don't know if that helps, but the movement is one of the things the research shows is that we want less movement in the afternoon if the person is a high sundowner. I used to have a dance party every afternoon, and it was actually counterindicated according to the research. It actually jazzed them up. You want to lower the blinds, go to a calmer music. Dancing's very a dance party, and I have to tell you, my grandkids are big into dance parties. You just put on the right music, Baby Shark being the operative one right now. Then there's a complete dance, and Gramps loves to dance with them. Would never dance with me, but will dance with the grandchildren. I don't know if that is some help.
Thank you, Cate. Another question is, have you noticed any change in the progression of dementia when a person is engaged through activities?
Yes, and we see this all the time in the research. There is a slowing. I think it goes back to, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think that's what we're really seeing here. And one of the things that I want to be sure to cover, let's see, let me go backward. Can you go backwards in the slides, Allegra? Planning, we talked about that. You saw I had a little basket here or a box. Gathering things ahead, simple. Notice I went with 2 ingredients, just 2. A dance party, just have it queued up, right? Because if you have to keep telling Siri or Google, then sometimes you've lost the person, right? What's the best timing? I just spoke about sundowning and how you want to lower activity in the afternoon, keep all the high energy activity in the morning. And that, for children, this is true too. Knowing when they had a nap. Routine is sacred. We change routines, absolutely, but we're always aware that's going to be a price to be paid, and it's sometimes within the next 48 hours. There's going to be some sort of not working well, whether it's cognitively or just physically, some sort of agitation. I mentioned the gambler, know when to fold up. If the person is saying this is ridiculous and you say, oh, but the baby next door would really like this, and they're still saying this is ridiculous, then you say, well, I could use them for the church vacation Bible school. No one to fold up, and this is true for yourself. I mean, if you're tired, honestly, when I look back on my living with my father-in-law with Alzheimer's, and this was like 25 years ago, if we kept him out of the street, dry and fed, there were 4 adults in the house, and we were doing all we could. We didn't have the bandwidth to do the activities. We weren't very wise, and we didn't use resources we could have used. Like we could have assigned the 9 brothers and sisters to come in and do something, but we didn't, because we failed to ask for help, right? So a lot of that plays into this. And thinking outside the box. I mean, Rice Krispie treats were magical. I took them once to a fellow here in Potomac. He had Wernicke-Korsakoff, which is no speaking at all. And of course, nobody could use the microwave. I had to pre-microwave the marshmallows. And I had this big bowl, and he was stirring. And you know what? He sneezed right in there. And it's the first time the man gave any response. He sneezed all over the Rice Krispie bars. We all looked horrified, and he laughed hysterically. And that was the reward. We obviously did not eat those Rice Krispie bars. So you have to think outside of what you think you want to accomplish. Sometimes that's, can you help me pick strawberries, or can you help me mash them? One of my favorite tools is that old pastry masher, because people love to mash things, so the same goes for biscuits and Bisquick. And know your audience. I picked the lemmings because you've always got the one that doesn't want to participate, and then the ones that hang together. And but you want to know that you want to have fun, and that's the goal. And sometimes that maybe that has to involve food. I don't know. It depends on how they're wired. You always look for the children's craft, but we don't look for ones that are so ridiculous that they look like a kindergartner did them, right? We try to upscale them. That was the downside of doing things from your house, because I have a lot more creative things at my house than probably you do. Pipe cleaners, which are now called chenille sticks, as an example, make this a far more interesting project, as do the clothespins. And if you're stressed, they'll be stressed, and adapt and be flexible. That is kind of I think that's the learning curve on living life with dementia. But I want to thank you all. If you have any other questions, please let us know. Allegra, you can take it away or come back on if you like.
So again, we are at the end of the program. Thank you so much, Dr. Cate, for bringing us this excellent workshop again. And to our audience, thank you for making space to be with us today. As you sign out, there will be a brief survey. Please take a moment to answer those questions and let us know what you thought of today's workshop. Also, if you would like to share comments with Dr. Cate, you can include that in the survey. I also want to invite you to our next intergenerational workshop, Creative Engagement, How to Use Right and Left Brain to Improve Your Sense of Well-Being. This will be on June 9th from noon to 1 p.m. Join Patricia Dubroff, Creative Aging Specialist, as she provides this workshop that will teach you how to use right and left brain to improve your sense of well-being. And we will be doing a hands-on art project to create individualized note cards. And again, thank you so much for being here. I hope everyone has a great afternoon.